Hi, Jack.
Hi, Bob. Nice to
Hey,
see you again.
good to see you again. We last saw you. You are a scholar of religious studies, Jack Tsonis, at Western Sydney University in Australia. We last saw you talking about the Axial Age, a time during the first millennium BCE when, supposedly, according to Axial Age theory, great spiritual movements were born. Um, One thing we didn't reveal about you is that you are, even as we speak, starting a great spiritual movement of your own. And that's what we're going to talk about this time. What is your great spiritual movement, Jack?
Sauna. And I would already jump in and say I wouldn't describe it as a spiritual movement straight off the bat. I'd call it a social movement, with some strong spiritual elements definitely in there. But what I want to start is a global sauna revolution. Now,
It's called the saunitarian. We're talking about sauna, where people go to get hot, right? A sauna, and you're calling it the saunitarian movement, the global saunitarian movement.
yeah,
And you have a
exactly.
URL, right? What is the website they can go to? What's the
It
URL?
is thesaunitarian.org.
Okay.
So just like a Unitarian, or a
Mhm.
Presbyterian, this is a Saunitarian. And this is how the whole thing started, is that on 5 years ago in this Australian census for the question about religion, my friends and I, we had a sauna at home that we had bought off eBay. We really loved it. We were really getting into it. I didn't want to write no religion on the census again. So I kind of had this brainwave and just wrote Saunitarian. And then it took a while, but that idea kind of sat with me and I started to play with it. I'm drafting something called the Saunitarian Manifesto.
Mhm.
And it's basically a way of making sauna an identity, a marker of identity.
Mhm. And do you think it's just a coincidence that your last name is Sonis? So if one were to come up with a word denoting someone who follows you personally, you as a guru, that word might sound very much like Sonitarian.
Yeah, I have thought that before, and it was completely
Uh
coincidental.
huh.
I didn't realize it for quite a while.
So you're
It was
so you're promising not to abuse your spiritual authority. This is not about elevating you to guru status and then opening you up to all the forms of corruption that are known to be associated with guru status. That's not your plan.
No, that's definitely not the plan.
Okay, good.
That's definitely not the
So
plan. No,
so
it's a social movement to empower people, basically, where I kind of, we'll talk about it in more detail, I'm sure. But sauna is a really uh, enlivening, refreshing, regenerating kind of activity,
And
and
can I
it
can I
makes
stop and admit right now that I am a little bit of a sauna addict myself. We can get back to that, but I am like I have to sweat pretty much every day. Most days I do it via sauna. So go ahead.
okay. Good to hear. Good to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah, I
And
also sweat.
I may have signed up for your movement. I may be one of your worshipers by the end of this.
Good. Well, I should also say off the bat that one of the beautiful things about it is that it's a non-exclusive kind of movement,
Uh-huh.
meaning that it can simply be added on to anything you already do or
So you
anything
could
you
be a
already
Buddhist
are.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's
Okay,
perfect. And it's
Christian,
one of the
right?
few, identities that isn't compromised by being non-exclusive. Like it really doesn't conflict with any political or kind of metaphysical commitments. And the big reason for that, I think, is that sauna really ultimately is about practice, not belief. It's about doing something. There's very little propositional content associated with having an effective sauna. It just kind of works no matter what you think or believe. Um, I add on to that some kind of ideological elements that kind of take it from being an activity into an identity. So there is a kind of a belief component of sorts there, around kind of social connectivity and well-being and social justice. We'll get into all of that, but yeah, so it's a non-exclusive lifestyle choice.
Okay, but you do have to buy into social justice.
Well, you could be a Saunitarian who doesn't because it's a self-chosen identity, and I'm not the Pope.
Okay.
It's something that people can choose.
But you
Um,
do, is it that you think there is something natural about the sauna experience as it evolved, something about the sauna experience as it's evolved that naturally lends itself to communitarian,
Yes.
egalitarian vibes.
100%. That's exactly it. It definitely lends itself to that in a number of ways. It within the sauna itself, I mean, it's famously a place where everyone becomes equal. In terms of, I'm sure it doesn't always work like that in practice, but it is a real leveling place. It gets used a lot in international diplomacy by the Finns in particular. And there's a long history of that. But it's one of those things that whenever you read an ethnographic text about sauna, or someone writing about their experiences of bathing in a particular culture, always that idea of it kind of leveling out is very prominent. So that's why it feeds in. It brings people together as well. Like, it's very much a social activity. You can do it on your own, and it's lovely to sweat on your own, especially if you have a home sauna. But by and large, bathhouses in history have been public places. They're very much, I mean, in Islam, for example, the hammam was often one of the few places that women had in the whole of society to talk on their own.
What is the hammam? What is that?
The hammam is like the Islamic version of a sweat bathing apparatus. It's more like a steam room than a sauna. It's more.
Now, is that related to the Turkish bath or not?
Yeah. The Turkish bath is a kind of like derivative of the hammam. The Turkish bath, so-called, arrived in England in about 1850. Brought by a guy called David Urquhart, who was a diplomat. There's a really fantastic new book about this, actually, called Victorian Turkish Baths, by a guy called Malcolm Schifrin, just published late last year. So the Turkish bath is a derivative of the hammam, which is presumably linked to the old Roman baths and the bathing culture of that the Romans brought with them when they were colonizing Syria and the Middle East.
Okay.
So yeah, the exact history of all of that is a bit blurry at the moment, and very difficult to discern purely from archaeological records. But back to the social kind of factors of it, or aspects of sauna. Yeah, it really brings people together. It creates a very pro-social mood. I mean, this is something I actually want to investigate more scientifically, but sort of anecdotally and ethnographically, people nearly always feel great after a sauna. They'll almost invariably feel a lot better after than they do before. It's a kind of thing that people look forward to. It creates good space for talking, and I think that's incredibly important. It's becoming increasingly important now that our lives are so fast, so sort of atomized and isolated and individualized in so many ways, that to have the kind of space like sauna where time is just slower, where you're offline, your phone won't work in the sauna. You know what I mean?
You're making me feel guilty about how I use my sauna time. I have to confess that what I typically do is bring a newspaper into the sauna. Now, in my defense, see, I do the sauna after swimming. What's that? Is that acceptable?
I support.
You support
that,
this
sure.
initiative? Okay. In my defense, where I do my swimming, I am very, very often the only person in the sauna, as it happens.
Uh-huh.
But it's funny. It was just today. I went into the sauna with my paper. I said, "Do you mind if I turn the light on?" He said, "No," and I was kind of and he said something else, and I was kind of wishing I wanted to have a conversation with him, because you do have interesting conversations in saunas. I mean, there is something about it. I mean, it's and I kind of half regretted that I wound up just reading my newspaper. But I'm usually happy to be distracted from it, because you do meet a variety of people in saunas.
And where is this? Is this in an apartment complex? Or is this at a swimming pool? Or is this at...
Usually where I'm doing this is at a YMCA. There's also a health club around here where I sometimes do it. But it's always a place, with me, it's always a place with a swimming pool and usually other exercise facilities and a sauna.
So this is a really key part of what I'm hoping to push, is that there are different ways of doing sauna, right? And by far the most common place you'll find a sauna is where you've just described. It's basically an add-on to somewhere where there's exercise available. far less common is just a bathhouse,
Right.
right? Where you go there for the sauna, and that is the real. Those are the places where it really is a social experience, because when people are all coming there to bathe,
Mhm.
you get a lot. The type of sauna that people have is a lot longer. It's a lot more kind of indulging the art of the sauna rather than just a cool. This is a nice 15 minutes after I've done my exercise.
Right.
So you get a lot more of that social kind of activity. And where the place, I mean, I'd fallen in love with sauna, the experience, but the place where I fell in love with the idea of sauna as a social institution was actually in New York, at the Russian Turkish bathhouse on East 10th Street, where it's exactly that. There are 5 different kinds of sauna there. There's a roof deck, there's a cafe, you know, you can get a beer while you're in a towel. And just every single time I went there, I would have conversations with people, even if I wasn't really trying to. It's full of people like seething in and out, hot and sweaty. People are, you know, because it's dark as well, people kind of happy to talk to a stranger.
I know a guy who was singing the praises of that very place in New York, and was trying to get me to go there. I haven't been yet, but
it's increasingly well known. It's famous for being operated by 2 different guys over 2 different, like 1 week is a David week, 1 week is a Boris week, and you know, one pass is only valid for the right week. And David in particular, the David week has gotten increasingly popular through the use of Groupons and things like that. So in the last 2-3 years, there's been a real tipping point where it's a very kind of hipster place now, especially in that week. So if you want to slightly you know, an experience that's slightly more like it was 10 years ago.
How do you spot a hipster in the sauna? If they're not wearing their clothes, it's harder to spot the hipsters, right?
Yeah, a lot of tattoos though.
I guess.
But it's just a lot of young people, as opposed to the older. You know, for example, the Boris week is still a bit. He doesn't even use a cash register.
Now, speaking of Boris, is it a Russian thing to like beat yourselves with those like leaves or whatever?
Branches?
Yeah. What is the deal there? What?
Okay. Yeah. So that is it's both Russian and Finnish. There are some things that are Russian, some things that are Finnish, but the leaves are very much used in both cultures. They're called vita in Finnish and venik in Russian. Basically, it's to improve circulation. That's the bottom line, right? You sort of whip yourself with these branches. We might be able to we'll put a photo or a link up, you know, and it encourages a bit of extra blood flow. You can get a treatment where someone will, you know, kind of give you a good whacking over and a bit of a massage and things like that, and that feels incredible. You can also just do it yourself. There's a lot of, you know, kind of sitting there doing that. And that is, if like I was in Helsinki in the public saunas last August, and they just have a few Vitas lying around for people to use. So it's very much a part of the Finnish sauna culture as well as the Russian. What is uniquely Russian, and well, it's Russision and Slavic as opposed to Finnish, is sauna hats, which some people may or may not have seen. I've got an example just here that I basically it's like a felt hat, right?
Nice hat.
Yeah. So you wear it.
Does it have a function?
Yeah, it's very functional. It protects your head a lot from the heat that's belting down on top of it. So
does that mean you can stay in the sauna longer then?
Yeah, usually if it's a hot sauna, then definitely. I liken it to wearing a hat in the desert. You know, it's a bit it's not you know, Finnish people don't really wear it. If it's a big sauna, you don't need it as much because the steam doesn't hit you quite as hard. But for example, I've heard that in Kazakhstan, they have a particular kind of sauna that's really quite hot. And you more or less have to wear one of these, the way that they kind of design it and heat it. So these hats are very, very much an Eastern European thing. You don't see Finns wearing sauna hats very often.
Okay, a technical point. You mentioned steam cascading down. That may confuse some people because they may think, well, wait, a sauna is dry heat, and then you've got your steam bath. And I'm actually interested in what you think of the different rewards that the two offer. But in a sauna, although this is discouraged in some saunas, but I suppose traditionally it is fine to take a ladle, pour water on the hot rocks, and generate a wave of steam that's very discernible. It's
Yeah.
like a good feeling to be enveloped by that steam amid the
Yeah.
dryness. But that's what you're talking about there, right?
That's sorry, that is what I'm talking about. And you're right that there are some saunas don't allow that. Um, and I think
Especially, I
that's
mean, but the electric ones, I think there's an issue with, they don't want you pouring a lot of water on electric coils. I think that's part of it, right?
well, yeah, but only some electric stoves. My stove down in the backyard is electric, and that takes water just fine. There are
Hmm.
some types that aren't prepared for water, which I think is stupid because it's far better to have the option because most people agree with you that it's a beautiful feeling to have those clouds of warm vapor roll over you.
Hmm.
Um, and some, I mean, but there's a really good sauna in, you might know Bondi Beach in Sydney. It's one of our famous kind of beaches here in Sydney. They actually have a sauna and there's a swimming pool at the end of the beach and there's a sauna there and beautiful views out into the ocean. It's incredible, except that the stoves will often break because people put water on them. And it's just absurd and scandalous that they haven't replaced them with proper heaters. But so yeah, a sauna is dry with hopefully the option for increased moisture. A steam room is a very different proposition because it's typically more around, say, about 50 degrees centigrade. I don't really know what that is Fahrenheit off the top of my head. Maybe
Yeah,
like 120 or something like that.
I would guess that because the saunas are generally in the kind of 150, 180 range here.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
a steam bath will feel as hot as a sauna, even though it's not as hot because, as they say, it's not the heat, it's the humidity.
Yeah, exactly right. The just like you can stick your hand in an oven that's, at 180 Fahrenheit, but if you touch the steel, you're going to burn.
Hmm.
The different levels of conductivity. So this is also why the application of the water is so nice in a dry sauna because you kind of get to modulate that steam.
Right.
And you can sweat up nice and dry and then hit yourself with a blast of wet heat. It's quite fun and it really does feel luxurious.
So, did you like just have a conversion experience on your first sauna or what? How did it feel?
Yeah, not my first one was as a child, and that wasn't a conversion moment.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure I didn't have one for like another 10 years or even longer. And then I was at a friend's house in Finland, so it was a pretty classic story in that sense. I'd been on exchange, I'd met a friend. I went and visited him for a few weeks or for a few days, and we went up to his country house, classic Finnish summer house by the lake. They had a sauna. I thought, wow, that sounds nice, sure. And then had one with his dad, every day for the next 3 days, and it was just glorious. Just this kind of beautiful tingle on the skin, this sense of relaxation. I mean, amplified by the fact that we're sitting there in a beautiful Finnish countryside setting, with a beer and good food and whatever. But that was the experience. Then my friends and I, a few years later, started visiting. We would go swimming. We would have what we called a triple S, where we would have a swim, spa, sauna, on a Monday night. And we're lounging around there in the spa and the sauna, living it up in our early 20s. And we kind of got talking that we should buy a sauna. We all live together. Why don't we buy one of these things? Imagine having one of these at home. Sure enough, one night we just decided to do it. Looked on eBay. There it was, $1,000. We had to drive for 14 hours to get it. Well, 14 hours each way to get it in a high-end truck. So it was like a 48-hour kind of round trip of about 1,500 miles. It was a big journey.
And then what? You just plug it in when you get home, or it was an electric?
We didn't think that far ahead. We had to then call our friend who's an electrician to come around and install it. And it was one of those houses where the real estate agent didn't come around very often. They never even knew it was there for 5 years.
Uh-huh.
But then we had it at home, and it was a life changer. We started, just like I said before, with the whole idea that if you've got a bathhouse that's kind of separated from any exercise or whatever, people treat it a little differently. It was a bit the same at our place. Now people would come around for a sauna. It wasn't just like, oh, we're doing things and we could sweat quickly after. People would come around and, we'd be in for, sit in for 20 minutes, have a break for 10, sit in for, 20, go in and out a few times. And a lot of people had maybe had a sauna in a gym or on holiday or something like that in the hotel or whatever. But it was just, like, okay, whatever. once you get shown how to use it properly, and this is a really key part of it, that how to exploit it, how to enjoy it. People were, they were coming out sort of with their world rocked. They were like, "Oh my God, this is incredible!"
Mhm.
So this was for us kind of proof of concept of why it wasn't just us. It was people really did love this, and the key thing is that no one knows how to use it in Australia, especially. Like, we have quite a lot of saunas in gyms and hotels, but there's no bathhouse. There's no place where you can go to it to kind of develop a culture. And meet people and bathe in that kind of way, and sauna in that kind of way that you do, and it's just a bathhouse, not a gym.
Mhm.
So that's how I got into it all those years ago.
And at what point did you feel motivated to actually start a movement, a global, become, as you put it, I believe, a thermovangelist?
Yeah. When did I get into thermoevangelism? It was a slow build that started probably in 2010 when I first visited the Russian-Turkish bathhouse in New York. It got me kind of thinking. It was just after that I had to answer the question about religion on the census, and so I kind of thought, well, saunitarian, why not? I started mulling that over for a while, and I started planning. I've got big dreams to build something called the Sydney Sauna Centre, like a kind of big community centre, bathhouse and social movement. That was already a kind of thermoevangelism where I'd start talking, to people about it. Increasingly, I thought I've got to, there's a saying that if you think about something every 24 hours, you should probably do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's an idea that keeps coming back to you, you should probably do it. And it got to that point kind of last year. I was going to Germany for a conference, and I managed to fly Finnair. I would recommend that any sauna lovers always fly Finnair if going to Europe, because it will go through Helsinki and you can lay over, and you can just choose to lay over for a bit longer and explore the city. And I just really had a fantastic experience there. 3 different saunas in 3 different days, met a lot of people, bought a lot of books in an antique bookstore, sauna-related books.
A lot of sauna books?
Oh, yeah, 500 euro.
Were they in English?
No, some of them were. A lot of them were in Finnish, but I'm a
speak Finnish?
No, but that's something, I bought an LP before I had a record player to try and encourage me to buy a record player when I was younger.
So the hope is that you will learn to speak Finnish and read these books as you're...
Yeah, or I will find Finnish collaborators that can help me translate them for research purposes. I'm trying to basically acquire a library where now I'll buy even weird sauna novels, I'll pick up.
Sauna novels.
There's the odd one around, not Mills and Boon, but just if you punch sauna into Amazon, you'll find a few strange things.
Mm-hmm.
But
you're a scholar. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it was this trip to Finland that really got me last August that ticked me over, and so that's what made me start the blog. I've also started not just the blog though, but something called the Australian Sweatbathing Association, ASBA, which is a like a big not-for-profit. Because there's something called the International Sauna Association. They were established in 1957 to kind of promote sauna around the world and to unite national sauna associations, started by Finland, Germany, Japan, Austria, Sweden, those kind of places. Now there's about 25 members. And I'm pleased to say that ASBA has just applied to be a member of the ISA, so we'll hear about that shortly, but I expect the news will be good. I've gone down and met the Finnish ambassador in Canberra already. We a few weeks ago to discuss how we advance sauna culture in Australia. So we're trying to pitch this line of a new Australian sauna culture. So I'm sort of trying to do 2 things, which I'm not even sure how they're going to work. One is start the Australian Sweatbathing Association and kind of get that up and running. The other is the broader global saunitarian movement, for which I'll need to write the manifesto and probably do some like world travel involving a lot of saunas with a lot of interesting people. But this is the kind of madcap crazy plan that I'm hatching.
And at that point, you will be a world religion.
People
who may have listened to our last dialogue will appreciate the irony there, because you don't like
we'll be a global social movement.
You don't like the term world religion, but more seriously, you are a scholar of religion. And though I doubt, you're going to say this is a religion in any kind of classic sense, does it have some of the aspects of spirituality? And if so, what are they?
Yeah. Absolutely. You can definitely render it as such. I mean, you can take saunas and not really see it in that way. But if you want to sink into it, you can definitely see a lot of what I would call functional equivalencies. So keywords like ritual, tradition, transcendence in an interesting way. Normally, I don't like the concept of transcendence, or I think it's a bit slippery. Here, I would say though that what you have is this, especially when you kind of start putting steam on the rocks, it kind of transports you. It's hard to concentrate on anything. I mean, as soon as you walk into that room and start sweating, it's a kind of liminal space. It's a kind of enforced meditation, and I mean, I often, whenever I step out of the sauna and I've got that, my heart is racing and I'm feeling really good and it's a very intense physiological experience. I often think of Pentecostalism actually, and that like that a lot of religions kind of encourage, or in their services, there's a real element of getting the physiology moving. It's not just sitting there thinking, it's actively doing things. They're very physically sort of inactive. And that physical activity creates something that Emile Durkheim called collective effervescence, a kind of group bonding, a group bubbling over, a group kind of spirit. It's a little bit the same when you walk out of the sauna. Everyone's feeling great. And I always think, I'll bet that most churches in the world wish that their adherents felt this good when they walked out of a service.
Mm-hmm. Now, you use the term liminal space. That's kind of a technical term of scholarship. You just want to define that?
Yeah, so and I'm not even using it too technically, but what I'm referring to is a space where kind of it's outside the normal, it feels outside the normal flow of time. It's like when you sit, just like meditation, if you effectively, sink into a meditation, 20 minutes can feel like an hour, right? You kind of sink into a really different headspace. The body just kind of finds a different groove. It's a little bit like that. Mm-hmm. I keep a timer, a sand timer in the sauna, a 15-minute timer. 15 minutes is a really good amount of time because some people don't like having the timer in there. I do, because then I can sort of zone out, but have a loose reference point to what's happening kind of in the outside world, especially if you want to, you're on a deadline, you've got to go to work or you've got to go out or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a nice way to relax. But so in that way as well, there's an idea that religious temples are kind of these sanctuaries, a space where you step out of the normal flow of the mundane world, right? And you step into a kind of a sacred space. I wouldn't want to use sacred in exactly the equivalent term, in exactly the equivalent way, rather. But when you step into a sauna, it's kind of the same thing. That just by sheer force of the heat and the actual like physicality of the space, you're in it's different from the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's physically replenishing because it makes the blood flow. It brings heat to the skin, especially if you cool down afterwards. You can get a really nice kind of endorphin rush. But even just psychologically, it's very replenishing. It's kind of it's like I sometimes call it bullshit neutralization therapy. That the kind of idea of like the bullshit of the world, the hectic, fast-paced, relentless kind of pressures put upon us all the time. It's very hard to focus on any of that in any angsty way in a sauna.
Right.
Even if you're thinking about it, you're typically just kind of in a bit of a meditative sort of zone with it. Yeah. As someone who exercises a lot, you'll know that when you're riding a bike and when you're swimming, you're thinking a lot of thoughts, but it's hard to lock on to anything. You're kind of like, you've got a lot of thoughts swimming around the head, but it's, they're very much swimming around the head, that you're not precisely locking onto them. I don't know if you experience that, but definitely when I'm kind of running or swimming, I swim a lot. The sauna is kind of like that. So these various aspects, and I also mentioned ritual. Mm-hmm. So there is, especially if you want to like play up, treat it a little bit like a religion. I mean, you've got buckets and ladles. You've got these kind of sauna hats that can function.
Do you have any ladles there you can show us?
I do have a ladle. This is my favorite. Nice. This is my favorite ladle. Obviously, wooden handle for conductivity. This is the same principle as I've got a bucket here as well. So nice wooden handle, brushed steel. This one's starting to get a little bit. I just put a bit of water on my computer. But yeah, so it's
and then the toilet paper you use, which you're doing to clean up the water if you put it somewhere it shouldn't be. In this case, on a computer.
I didn't think there was any water left in that bucket. You saw it here live.
Yeah.
I think I've salvaged the computer though.
So far,
But so
it looks
all
good.
of all of these items kind of give it a they're like props, right? They're like it's hard to just mentally configure something as religious and just claim that it is. But if you've got all of these props, it helps you kind of get into character. And look, at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be religious to be effective, but there are definitely some similarities that if you're not religious and you don't have those things elsewhere in your life, you can choose to um, treat the sauna experience in that way. Like it's deliberately kind of spoofish, but not, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and these sweat lodges are actually used in, I guess, kind of
Well,
New
yeah,
Age religions. In fact, not that long ago, some people died, I think, overdoing it. But
yeah,
one, thing that points to is that it's there's a progression of experience in a sauna. In other words, you get in there, it's just kind of relaxing, it's nice. But as you heat up, if you stay there, the nature of the experience changes and it
yeah,
becomes like super intense.
yeah,
And especially if you stay there beyond the point where a wiser person might leave for fear
yeah.
of death, it becomes like a very, it becomes more, I don't want to know if it's like cathartic or salvific or I don't want to overdo it, but it's different from merely relaxing, right?
100%. You've described it really, really well in that progression, and that is it. That it's nice and relaxing and warm, and then your blood is just pumping and pumping, and then it starts to get a little bit intense. And I usually say to people that you kind of want to stay in a sauna until you get lightheaded. Like you want to leave pretty soon after you get lightheaded,
Mm-hmm.
but for full effect, you want to push your body to that limit. So that's something that some people who have no idea about sauna maybe don't know. Like for example, someone's at a hotel, there's a sauna down in the gym, they decide they'll go and use it without really knowing how to do it. Often people won't stay in for long enough because
Right.
they'll feel a bit uncomfortable without realizing that that's really key to the full experience. You mentioned the sweat lodges as well. I mean, so it's already, even if we're not in a sweat lodge, we're just in a normal sauna. Once you get past that first phase, you're right, it is just and that's the kind of liminal space I suppose I was talking about. But in a sweat lodge in particular, yeah, they will use that for, they will append that to, as you say, a kind of various kinds of new age sort of ideas, and it's very conducive for that. If people are going in there wanting to believe that that's what the experience is going to give them, and you need the theatrics for that as well, the whole shamanic theatrics,
Mm-hmm.
and you typically need people who are wanting to experience it rather than completely cynical.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're completely cynical, you'll still have an intense physiological experience, but you won't regard it as a spiritual one.
And then there's also the possibility, speaking of dramatic experiences, of applying a lot of cold water at the end. I was in Switzerland. I was in a sauna where they had a pool of super cold water. I mean, I was afraid that it would kill me. I was afraid that I would have a heart attack if I just dove into it. But one thing I do is, I usually take a cold shower afterwards. And if it's
Yep.
in the winter when the water is really cold, I'm only half joking. You can almost have a religious experience. I mean, it's like there have been times when so you're super hot, you go into that really cold shower, it hits you, and I remember times when looking at a fixture on the shower and there's like a rusty bolt and just looking at it and going, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's like you're at a meditation retreat or something. It can be now. So in some places that's part of the culture, right? I mean, there is a pool of cold water. At the average American Health Club, that's not going to be part of the drill, but that is in some places, right?
That absolutely is, and you're right. For me, the cold plunge is absolutely essential for a really good sauna experience, and to the extent where in the sauna that I use in the backyard here in Sydney, I have an ice bucket routine where I will crack about every sauna, even in the middle of winter, I'll crack about 5 trays of ice into a bucket that will melt over the 40 minutes that I'm kind of having a few sets. And then I will kind of douse myself at the end because the water just kind of isn't cold enough out of the hose for me. but I really think I love when a bathhouse has a cold plunge pool. So again, I mentioned the place in New York, the Russian Turkish bathhouse. The other pivotal element of that becoming of being like a kind of a conversion moment for me was the plunge, because I'd been having saunas for a few years and never had a proper ice water experience.
Hmm.
And then I got the Platzer where they hit me with the leaves and things like that. So I was already feeling good. And then they kind of basically threw me in the pool and said, now go and sit down. And my skin was tingling. It was kind of like, really high quality drugs with no negative side effects or whatever. Didn't last for that long, but for 5-10 minutes, because you got to imagine your core is spewing out heat. Your body is like a sponge that sucks up the heat. That's why you steam, in the cold air after. So when you jump in cold water, it shocks your outer layer,
Hmm.
so you get this really chilled feeling, but pretty soon you'll be kind of warm again. So it can be, if you've got a really bad heart, it's not recommended to
Right.
get in. But if you don't have any chronic heart problems, there's virtually no kind of deaths recorded that I'm aware of from people jumping in. There's one or two cold plunge deaths, but those people had really bad hearts. But it's a really good part of the experience. And as you say, like cold water in winter is almost good enough.
Hmm.
And probably in the Northern Hemisphere is definitely good enough. But yeah, the cold plunge, for those who haven't done it, is to be highly recommended. You'll see the Finns and the Russians kind of do this in the snow. And it was a famous feature of early travel writing to Russia and Finland that they would talk about. They described it in very similar terms. These maniacal people who beat themselves with branches and then go and roll around in the snow and seem to enjoy it, in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and actually at the Russian Turkish place in New York, my goodness, they have in their hottest room, they have a well of ice cold water, and buckets. So it's sitting up there probably around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a really hot room,
Right.
really dry. But you've got these buckets of ice water, and you just every 5 minutes you just douse yourself. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Um, so what do we know about why sweating makes you feel good? Is there much of a well-developed science here?
Short answer is no. There's not a really well-developed science, not compared to other fields. Because when we say why does it make us feel good, we're asking quite a complex question about a whole heap of different physiological elements. So I've been doing a lot of research in the last 6 months, all of the saunatarian stuff and blogging and whatever, but I'm also trying to do a serious academic kind of side to all of this. So there's been very little in the way of systematic studies and things like that. But having a look at it, there's no simple answer as to why it makes you feel so good in the specific way that it does. I think that's still an open question. It will have to do with endorphins, um, uh, just like all exercise. It's kind of equivalent to the runner's high, I guess.
Hmm.
There's a different element. Obviously, a sauna though feels very different to a run. There's less shock on the body, and the body's heated in a different way, and they feel quite different. So there's still, I mean, for academics, it's a really exciting area because there's a lot that we can kind of move into to quantify the health benefits. In terms of established benefits though of sauna bathing, I mean, there's some really encouraging stuff around its use for cardiovascular health, both in normal healthy subjects, but even interestingly for people with stable heart conditions. Sauna's typically been contraindicated for anyone with a bad heart, and that is still true in some cases. But there's been some studies that have shown positive effects for, say, recuperation and recovery from myocardial infarctions, I think, and other types of coronary, issues. You've got it's pretty good for the metabolism and the like the general endocrine system. Again, there's only some sparse studies out there. But basically, when you read sauna studies, aside from a few that are looking at specific, issues, for instance, burns in the sauna, there's a lot of articles about those. But by and large, scientific articles will say, results are encouraging, but further studies needed to be done to, confirm the results. There's been very little in the way of longitudinal studies or mass studies, except one study published just last year in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the JAMA, by a team from the University of Eastern Finland who were looking at cardiovascular health, sauna use and long-term cardiovascular health. And it was a sample size of about 2,500 men, so it was quite solid. And it was they were measured in a 6-year period from 1983 to 1989, and then sort of followed up a decade or so after for instances of coronary disease and other types of heart issues. And again, the results are only suggestive, but there's an association between the people using more sauna having slightly fewer coronary issues, and also those having longer sauna sets. So say 20 minutes versus 10 minutes in the box. Again, it's all tentative. There's nothing. There's no nowhere near enough evidence that a responsible scientist could say anything firmly. But there's some really interesting associations that need to be pursued. So I'm working actually with one of the authors of that finished study to launch something called the International Journal of Sauna Studies.
Your ambition is boundless when it comes to.
Oh, well, why not? You got a good idea. Why not? People always talk about doing something innovative or different. This is a real lucky chance that if pursued for a few years, we'll be able to build an International Journal of Sauna Studies and an international research network that fills a really important role. I'm very big on making sure academic work is socially valuable, because there's a lot of it that's kind of not, or people don't take their social responsibilities very seriously from the privilege of academia. So this is a really great way, though, to encourage interdisciplinary studies that are really focused on human health. I mentioned earlier that I think sauna is especially important in the 21st century as a kind of offline social technology, a community building kind of technology. So I think that we're only going to be able to advance that agenda with a really robust evidence base. That's just the way it works. And that's fair enough too, because otherwise the charlatans come in. But we need to, quantify a whole lot of this stuff. There's a lot of really positive studies around mental health and depression that could be done, because anecdotal evidence is really good about the use of very, very anecdotal evidence. I'm talking friends and reading stuff online and autoethnographic stuff, but about sauna being a really good kind of part of a suite against sort of negative mental health. It's really good for people with arthritis, is again anecdotally reported. Some encouraging studies on rheumatoid diseases and things like that. But that's the kind of thing where governments, I think, once we actually have a research infrastructure, that they'll be really interested in funding that, because we've got aging populations. We want to know a lot about how we can kind of manage some of the chronic health problems of older people. And if regular saunaing is a good, simple, cheap way that people kind of like doing, because it's a lot easier than exercise as well. It takes a lot less willpower. It's like a luxurious version of yoga, meditation, and exercise all rolled into one.
I mean, for me, I occasionally do it when I don't have time to exercise at all. But the main reason I started doing it is because I just found that although swimming, feels great in its own way, it didn't make me feel as good as being outdoors and sweating, like jogging, riding a bike. Something made me actually sweat, because, I assume you just don't, if you're swimming in a fairly cool pool, you just don't sweat much because you never get that hot. But for whatever reason, I never felt, I need the sauna after the swim. I
call that a swim and sweat.
A swim and sweat. Yeah, well, I do a lot of that. And I also have this view that, people, we live in a very artificial environment. There's a lot of things that were characteristic of humans during evolution that are not done now. So, for example, if I'm taking a walk and I have the option of walking on an uneven surface, like on grass rather than a sidewalk, I will do that, because we did not evolve to walk on sidewalks. And there's going to be repetitive motion. And also, I've noticed I feel a lot better after a walk along an uneven surface, like a hike, than I do like walking through New York on the sidewalk. So that's an example. I feel kind of the same way about sweating. Like probably our ancestors sweated a lot, and of course, the one of the main function of sweating, I assume, is just to cool the body off. Because evaporation is a cooling thing. But I assume that natural selection being the thrifty thing it is, that as long as you're going to be expelling this liquid, you would get rid of bad stuff too. And it is said that sweating gets rid of toxins, but I've never known whether there's any actual validation of that or it's just something people say. And I don't even know what exactly they mean by toxins.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and that's another one where there's a lot of work still to be done, and you have quite a lot of stuff on the contents of sweat, but not to do with, say, sauna studies.
Yeah.
And if you look, I mean, the basic idea when people talk about toxins, yeah, I'm still not across entirely all the things that people are concerned about, but often we're talking about heavy metals and things like that. People get kind of worried about heavy metals in the blood and things like that. Or sweating a hangover sauna is nice as well, sweating out some of the booze that's still in your system and things like that. Again, we need to quantify all of this. I get a little bit concerned with the whole toxins or the whole toxins idea. It's typically associated with a more new agey approach to sauna, and the reason I'm concerned is not because there's no effect, but because there's a kind of a not much of an attitude of basing things on really well verified science. It's a bit more kind of impressionistic. And there's a really interesting study to be done about, the kinds of people attracted to infrared saunas, because that's a very different kind of sauna experience. The air isn't as hot. It's not as social because you have to sit in I don't know if you've ever used an infrared sauna, but you have to sit, nearly all of them, you have to sit in a particular place because you kind of need the pads to be heating you in a certain way. So it's far less of a social kind of lounge around, toss some water on the rocks, have a chat, this and that. It's not quite the same. And you don't get those wafts of beautiful, like hot steam rolling over you either. So I've only done it once or twice, and it makes you feel it heats you up really quickly. You sweat quicker than the radiant heat. But the reason I mention this in relation to toxins is because people say that the infrared rays penetrate further and you sweat a different kind of sweat and you sweat out more toxins in an infrared sauna. That kind of claim I haven't seen any actual validation of. It's kind of like a bit of a flimsy association between you sweat more, therefore it's kind of better. And people said the sweat is slightly oilier as well. I haven't gone and tested this out. And the only studies that exist on this stuff have the character of a kind of fringe medical thing to them. So I've acquired a bunch of things that I'm yet to read. So, within, 12 months or so, at a personal level, I'll have codified a lot of this more. But like a great example of the kind of thing that the International Journal of Sauna Studies needs to run a long-term, series on. Like, what people claim that sauna is great for detox. What does that mean? How valid is it? What are the different, difference between infrared and traditional sauna? What are the differences between, pre-existing body states going in? All of that kind of stuff.
Anecdotally, it seems to me that if I have a sauna after my morning coffee, then I am better prepared to have afternoon coffee without it feeling like I've had too much coffee. Right? It's like that second stage of caffeine goes down better and feels cleaner than if I haven't sweated in the meanwhile. But that's just an anecdote.
And I wonder if it would be the same if you sweated before the first coffee. That's a good one where my intuitive sense is that like sauna is good for the metabolism. It kind of pushes things through. You don't want to go right after you've eaten, but a little bit after you've eaten, it's kind of nice. It can kind of push things through a little quicker. So it may well be that your body is kind of clearing through whatever technical way it does that, the caffeine, so and laying probably some other kind of physiological foundation that the second cup in the afternoon doesn't make you feel as dirty or as jittery or whatever. I mean, I kind of see sauna as well. Like a lot of people, if you've got to go out in the evening, you have a shower beforehand to reset yourself. Sauna is like, that times 10. It's like the proper rejuvenation.
Right.
It's like a full scale kind of regeneration. But yeah, so it does have a lot of, it can kind of send you up in the morning. If you have a sauna, you can kind of get on with the day. But if you want to do it at night, it can kind of be a nice way to take you down as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it always makes it easy for me to take a nap if I want to.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the sauna.
Oh yeah, well you got to be careful of that.
Yeah, but my governing assumption is that I would wake up before dying. I have enough faith in natural selection to think that if you are baking to death, your body would set off some kind of alarm. But maybe I'm wrong.
if it's natural sleep that.
But I don't lie down and go to sleep. It's more like
close your eyes,
nodding off, walking. Yeah. So I don't think that's the way I'm going to eventually.
Yeah, I would be doing that on the lower bench, but
Yeah. Good advice. Good sage advice from a veteran sanitarian. So where can people? They can go to your website and sign up, right? The sanitarian website.
Yeah. Look, at the moment, what they're signing up to is a newsletter, and it'd be great if people want to just get on that mailing list, because there's so much stuff happening that who knows when and where it's all going to kind of pop up. Like I started the Sanitarian website. It's probably worth saying this. I started that website with a plan to eventually, write the manifesto, eventually start the Sydney Sauna Centre, eventually maybe start some sauna culture in Australia. 9 days after starting the blog, I got the email from the president of the International Sauna Association. So from that very early, what I thought was going to take a while to happen started happening immediately, because I started having to do ASBA, which is the Australian Sweat Bathing Association, and then to back that up, or to make to mutually reinforce that, I'm going to be doing the journal as well, the International Journal of Sauna Studies. So the Sanitarian blog is kind of in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment. It's a bit frustrating. I wish I could be doing this full time, because then I could be blogging every week. But at the moment, I mean, I'm working a full-time job as well, with sort of 40, 50 hours a week, teaching graduate students, like overstretched academic staff, under-resourced kind of thing. So but I would love if people come and signed up for the blog, because that's a good way to, especially if the real ticket though is that people should be signing up for the International Journal of Sauna Studies, and because that will be what we'll have. Is my plan is fully open access. People can sign up to just be getting the latest updates. So it means anyone who's interested.
They can do that on the Sanitarian website too?
They can't do that yet because the journal isn't built. But if they're interested, then if anyone who's on the Sanitarian website mailing list will be kind of offered to,
They get a complimentary subscription to the As Yet Unborn journal.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, clearly people should get on this train right away.
It's the ground floor, guys. It's the ground floor. This is, and what we need, what I really want to be doing, is empowering people to start local sauna associations, local sauna clubs, local sauna groups. Like there's some really great guys over in Minnesota, the 612 Society. You should look them up if you're interested in this stuff. They're doing some really interesting things.
This is how the Apostle Paul did it. I mean, he traveled from town to town. He started these. And you don't have to travel thanks to modern technology.
This is thermoevangelism, right? Spreading the good heat.
Right.
And it needs people who've felt it. I mean, you've talked about it a number of times already just now, that you like what it is to have a good sauna and to have, the religious tingle with the cold water and all that kind of stuff. You need once people, it's a difficult proposition to understand that when you haven't felt it for yourself. So you need to kind of create the space for people to kind of do that, create enough interest and publicity that people will kind of get a bit more interested in doing it. You need to be bringing friends along and those kind of things. That's what we're hoping to empower, like, around the world.
Okay. So everyone, you will be able to say decades hence that you got in on the ground floor if you go to the Sanitarian website and sign up.
That's it.
Right now. And this has my blessing. So good luck with this, Jack, and thanks for your enthusiasm. I'm optimistic. I think with your energy level, this thing has a real shot at displacing the so-called great religions.
Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate it, and I'm going hell for leather because the world's pretty stupid. So why not?
That's a great motto. You're good at the branding part. Okay. Thanks a lot. Take care.